David and Goliath, David's mighty men, David and Saul. Much is discussed about the famous King David's rise to power and his reign. But did you know King David's final days were filled with betrayal, intrigue, and unexpected drama? In this video, we'll explore 3 shocking events from David's old age: beauty in the palace, a palace coup, and a hard judgment on enemies. Let's dive in as we will explore these fascinating events and more from David's remarkable life and legacy. As King David's life drew to a close, the nation of Israel faced both challenges and transformations. Despite his age and the turmoil around him, David's devotion to God never wavered. Before we go into the 3 shocking events, we need some background. David spent his last days ensuring that his son Solomon would continue the work he had begun. One of David's most profound acts was making provision for the building of the Lord's temple, a task he could not complete himself. In 1 Chronicles 28:11 and 12, it says, "Then David gave Solomon his son the plans for the vestibule of the temple, its buildings, its treasuries, its upper rooms, and its inner rooms, and the room for the mercy seat, and the plans for all that he had in mind for the courts of the house of the Lord, all the surrounding chambers, the treasuries of the house of God, and the treasuries for dedicated gifts." David's heart was set on building a permanent dwelling place for the Ark of the Covenant, symbolizing God's presence with his people. Although God did not permit David to build the temple, he honored David's intention and provided detailed instructions through him for Solomon. The nation had grown strong under David's rule, expanding its borders and securing peace through military victories and strategic alliances. Israel's relationships with neighboring countries were a testament to David's leadership. He had established peace treaties and trade agreements that benefited Israel economically and politically. His military prowess had subdued hostile nations, ensuring a period of relative peace. This is reflected in 2 Samuel 8:14. He put garrisons in Edom. Throughout all Edom he put garrisons, and all the Edomites became David's servants. And the Lord gave victory to David wherever he went. However, David's aging and the uncertainties of succession led to a tense atmosphere. The stability David had built was at risk as the nation prepared for a new king. One of the most profound aspects of David's life was God's covenant with him. God promised David that his lineage would endure forever, and this covenant was central to David's hope in the nation's future. In 2 Samuel 7:16, God declares, "And your house and your kingdom shall be made sure forever before me. Your throne shall be established forever." This promise gave David and the people of Israel assurance that despite the challenges they faced, God's plan was sovereign. David's trust in this covenant sustained him, even as he faced the end of his life. At this time of David's life, 3 tragic events happened that would leave anyone reading his story shocked and confused. You wonder why David permitted them and why God allows the events to be included in the Bible. One of the most intriguing and unexpected stories from King David's last days involves a young virgin woman named Abishag. Her presence at the end of David's life raised many questions and set off a series of events that would impact the future of Israel. As David grew old, he struggled with his health and was constantly cold. His servants suggested finding a young virgin to care for him and keep him warm. This led to the introduction of Abishag, a beautiful young virgin from Shunem. The Bible tells us in 1 Kings 1:1-4, "Now King David was old and advanced in years, and although they covered him with clothes, he could not get warm. So his servants said to him, 'Let a young woman be sought for my lord the king, and let her wait on the king and be in his service. Let her lie in your arms, that my lord the king may be warm.' So they sought for a beautiful young woman throughout all the territory of Israel, and found Abishag the Shunammite, and brought her to the king. The young woman was very beautiful, and she was of service to the king and attended to him, but the king knew her not." Though Abishag was brought to serve and care for David, the Bible is clear that their relationship was not sexual. But why did she have to be young and beautiful? One theory is that her youth and vigor would transfer to David and prolong his life. The Bible doesn't say more. The Bible only says her role was to provide comfort and warmth to the aging king. What we do know is this highlighted David's frailty in his final days. Abishag would play this role while King David was alive, but she actually plays another role after his death. After David's death, the political landscape shifted dramatically. Adonijah, one of David's sons, who had previously tried to claim the throne, saw an opportunity. He requested to marry Abishag, thinking it would strengthen his claim to the throne. In 1 Kings 2:17, Adonijah says to Bathsheba, Solomon's mother, "Please ask King Solomon, he will not refuse you, to give me Abishag the Shunammite as my wife." This request was more than a simple desire for marriage. It was a strategic move. In the customs of the time, marrying a king's concubine or companion could be seen as a claim to his throne. Solomon recognized this and saw the danger in Adonijah's request. He understood that this marriage would undermine his authority and potentially lead to rebellion. Solomon responded decisively. In 1 Kings 2:22-24, Solomon said, "And why do you ask Abishag the Shunammite for Adonijah? Ask for him the kingdom also, for he is my older brother. Yes, for him and Abiathar the priest and Joab the son of Zeruiah." Then King Solomon swore by the Lord, saying, "God do so to me and more also, if this word does not cost Adonijah his life. Now therefore, as the Lord lives, who has established me and placed me on the throne of David my father, and who has made me a house as he promised, Adonijah shall be put to death today." Adonijah's request led to his execution, solidifying Solomon's rule. As for Abishag, the Bible does not provide further details about her life after these events. Her story, however, serves as a poignant reminder of the complex and often dangerous interplay of beauty, power, and politics in the royal court. Being with King David in his last days, she likely would have been a first-hand witness to the second shocking event. In the final days of King David's life, the struggle for the throne of Israel became a dramatic tale of ambition, betrayal, and divine intervention. Two of David's sons, Absalom and Adonijah, made shocking attempts to seize the throne, leading to unexpected and tragic outcomes. As David grew old and weak, his son Adonijah saw an opportunity to claim the throne. Confident and ambitious, Adonijah declared himself king without David's blessing. He gathered chariots, horsemen, and 50 men to run ahead of him, and hosted a grand feast to solidify his claim. 1 Kings 1:5-6 tells us, "Now Adonijah the son of Haggith exalted himself, saying, 'I will be king,' and he prepared for himself chariots and horsemen, and 50 men to run before him. His father had never at any time displeased him by asking, 'Why have you done thus and so?' He was also a very handsome man, and he was born next after Absalom." Adonijah's attempt was bold, but it failed because he lacked David's endorsement and the support of key leaders. Nathan the prophet and Bathsheba, Solomon's mother, informed David of Adonijah's actions. David, reaffirming God's promise, declared Solomon as his successor, swiftly anointing him king. This is recorded in 1 Kings 1:39. There Zadok the priest took the horn of oil from the tent and anointed Solomon. Then they blew the trumpet, and all the people said, "Long live King Solomon." Despite his treachery, the newly appointed King Solomon would let Adonijah live for a brief moment. However, as we discussed earlier, Adonijah still lusted for power, which ultimately led to his execution. Surprisingly, Adonijah was not the first of David's sons to seek the throne. Earlier in David's life, Absalom, another of his sons, led a full-scale rebellion against his father. Absalom's charm and cunning won him many followers, and he declared himself king in Hebron. 2 Samuel 15:10 says, "But Absalom sent secret messengers throughout all the tribes of Israel, saying, 'As soon as you hear the sound of the trumpet, then say, Absalom is king at Hebron.'" Absalom's rebellion led to a civil war, causing great pain to David. Eventually, Absalom was killed in battle despite David's command to spare his life. His death brought deep sorrow to David, as shown in 2 Samuel 18:33, and the king was deeply moved and went up to the chamber over the gate and wept. And as he went, he said, "Oh, my son Absalom, my son Absalom, would I have died instead of you, O Absalom, my son, my son." These attempts to seize the throne are shocking for several reasons. First, they reveal the intense personal ambition and rivalry within David's family. Both Absalom and Adonijah sought power, without regard for God's plan or their father's wishes. Second, these events show the fragility of David's legacy and the constant threat of internal strife. After David's famous story with Bathsheba and Uriah, the prophet Nathan even prophesied about his house. In 2 Samuel 12:10 it says, "Now therefore the sword shall never depart your house, because you have taken the wife of Uriah the Hittite to be your wife." The third shocking event in King David's final days was his charge to Solomon to deal with his enemies decisively. Upon reading these verses, one would think it is a modern-day hit list. As David neared death, he gave his son Solomon a list of men he believed needed to be brought to justice. This list included figures who had wronged David or posed a threat to the stability of Solomon's future reign. The first among these enemies is Joab, David's military commander, but he had also committed serious offenses. He had killed two commanders, Abner and Amasa, during peacetime, actions David had never condoned. In 1 Kings 2:5 and 6, David says, "Moreover, you know also what Joab the son of Zeruiah did to me, how he dealt with the two commanders of the armies of Israel, Abner the son of Ner and Amasa the son of Jether, whom he killed, avenging in time of peace for blood that had been shed in war, and putting the blood of war on the belt around his waist and the sandals on his feet. Act therefore according to your wisdom, but do not let his gray head go down to Sheol in peace." Another enemy is Shimei. He cursed David during Absalom's rebellion, throwing stones and insults at the king. Although David had initially spared Shimei, he advised Solomon to ensure Shimei's wrongdoing did not go unpunished. In 1 Kings 2, verses 8 and 9, David tells Solomon, "And there is also with you Shimei the son of Gera, the Benjamite from Bahurim, who cursed me with a grievous curse on the day when I went to Mahanaim. But when he came down to meet me at the Jordan, I swore to him by the Lord, saying, I will not put you to death with the sword. Now therefore, do not hold him guiltless, for you are a wise man. You will know what you ought to do, and you shall bring his gray head down with blood to Sheol." David's charge to Solomon to execute these men is shocking for several reasons. David, known for his mercy and forgiveness, is here instructing his son to carry out acts of vengeance. This seems contrary to the image of David as a man after God's own heart. The orders underscore the fragile nature of Solomon's early reign. David's advice shows a recognition of the political threats that lingered even as Solomon took the throne. These instructions present a moral dilemma. Solomon is asked to judge and act harshly, balancing justice, political necessity, and mercy. Through this charge, we see the complexities of leadership and the burdens carried by those in power. David's final instructions to Solomon reveal the intricate web of loyalty, justice, and retribution that often accompanied ancient kingship. Though violent and complex, this tactic was effective. It helped bring a peaceful transition and usher in the prosperous and peaceful reign of King Solomon. As King David's life came to a close, the Bible recounts his passing with a sense of reverence and significance. David, the shepherd boy who became a mighty king, ended his days surrounded by his family, leaving a legacy that would shape Israel for generations. David's death is recorded in 1 Kings 2, 10 and 11. Then David slept with his fathers and was buried in the city of David. And the time that David reigned over Israel was 40 years. He reigned 7 years in Hebron and 33 years in Jerusalem. His death marked the end of an era, but his influence continued through his son Solomon and the promises God made to his lineage. After David's death, the Bible reflects on his life and his relationship with God. Acts 13:22 highlights God's special favors towards David, saying, "And when he had removed him, he raised David to be their king, of whom he testified and said, I have found in David the son of Jesse a man after my heart, who will do all my will." This verse underscores David's unique heart for God, despite his flaws and failures. David's legacy is also cemented through God's covenant with him. In 2 Samuel 7:16, God promises, "And your house and your kingdom shall be made sure forever before me. Your throne shall be established forever." This covenant is fulfilled in Jesus Christ, a descendant of David, emphasizing the enduring impact of David's lineage. David's story is one of highs and lows, triumphs and trials. His life teaches us about faith, repentance, and God's unfailing love. As we look back on his reign, we see a man who, despite his imperfections, was deeply devoted to God and instrumental in fulfilling his divine plan. David's famous stories stand out in the Bible among those of the heroes of faith. These are men and women who, through faith in God, overcame all challenges to uphold righteousness in a world that hardly acknowledges God, not to talk of honoring and serving him. David's journey from shepherd to king began in the most humble of settings. As a young shepherd boy, David was tending his father's sheep when the prophet Samuel visited his family with a divine mission. God had rejected Saul as king due to his disobedience. In 1 Samuel 16:1, God told Samuel, "Fill your horn with oil and go. I will send you to Jesse the Bethlehemite, for I have provided for myself a king among his sons." Samuel obeyed and traveled to Bethlehem, to the house of Jesse. When Samuel saw Jesse's sons, he initially thought the eldest, Eliab, was God's chosen one. But God told Samuel in 1 Samuel 16:7, "Do not look on his appearance or the height of his stature, because I have rejected him. For the Lord sees not as man sees. Man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart." As a short man, this is definitely a favorite verse of mine. One by one, Jesse's sons passed before Samuel, but none were chosen. Finally, David, the youngest, who was out in the fields, was called. When David arrived, the Lord said, "Arise, anoint him, for this is he." 1 Samuel 16:12. Samuel then anointed David with oil, and the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him from that day forward. 1 Samuel 16:13. David's anointing was the start of a remarkable journey. From a simple shepherd to the greatest king of Israel, his story shows how God sees beyond our circumstances and looks at our hearts. One of the most iconic moments in David's life was his fearless encounter with the giant Goliath. As a young shepherd, David's faith in God led him to face the formidable Philistine warrior with nothing but a sling and a stone. The Philistines had gathered for battle against Israel, and their champion Goliath taunted the Israelites daily. Goliath's size and strength terrified Saul's army. It is said that he was 9 feet 9 inches tall. But David, visiting his brothers at the battlefield, heard Goliath's defiance and was filled with righteous anger. In 1 Samuel 17:32, David said to King Saul, "Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him." David recounted his past experiences as a shepherd, explaining how he had killed both a lion and a bear to protect his flock. "The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine," he declared in 1 Samuel 17:37. Refusing Saul's armor, David approached Goliath with only his sling and 5 smooth stones. As Goliath mocked him, David proclaimed, "You come to me with the sword and with the spear and with the javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied." With a single stone, David struck Goliath on the forehead, and the giant fell face down to the ground. David's victory over Goliath was not just a triumph of courage, but a testament to his unshakable faith in God. This pivotal moment marked the beginning of David's rise to prominence in Israel. His defeat of Goliath demonstrated that, with faith, even the smallest and seemingly weakest can overcome the greatest of challenges. Little did David know that his victory over Goliath would make him a target of King Saul's jealousy. As David gained fame, Saul saw him as a threat to his throne, leading to a series of dramatic and dangerous events. After David defeated Goliath, the people of Israel celebrated him. They sang, "Saul has slain his thousands and David his tens of thousands." Saul's jealousy grew, and he began to see David as a rival. Despite Saul's hostility, David formed a deep and loyal friendship with Jonathan, Saul's son. Jonathan loved David as his soul, and they made a covenant of friendship. Jonathan even protected David from Saul's schemes, warning him of his father's plans to kill him. Saul's jealousy turned into deadly intent, and he repeatedly tried to kill David. David had to flee for his life, living in exile and hiding in caves. Despite his fugitive status, David spared Saul's life multiple times, showing his respect for Saul's anointed kingship. In 1 Samuel 24:10, David says, "I will not put out my hand against my Lord, for he is the Lord's anointed." David's trials during this time tested his faith and character. His friendship with Jonathan showed loyalty and love in the face of adversity. These events highlight God's protection over David and his plan for David's future as king, despite the immediate dangers and challenges he faced. After Saul's death, David's journey to kingship began in earnest. He was first anointed as king over Judah and Hebron. His reign started small, but soon expanded as he was anointed king over all of Israel, uniting the tribes under his leadership. One of David's significant achievements was capturing the city of Jerusalem from the Jebusites. Despite the city's strong defenses, David led his men to victory. 2 Samuel 5:7 says, "Nevertheless, David took the stronghold of Zion, that is, the city of David. He established Jerusalem as his capital, making it the political and spiritual heart of Israel." To signify the presence of God among his people, David brought the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem. This was a joyous and sacred event, symbolizing God's dwelling with his chosen people. 2 Samuel 6:14 and 15 describes the scene. "And David danced before the Lord with all his might. So David and all the house of Israel brought up the ark of the Lord with shouting and with the sound of the horn." David's actions in capturing Jerusalem and bringing the ark there established the city as a central place of worship and governance. These moves unified the nation and highlighted David's deep devotion to God, setting the stage for Jerusalem's lasting significance in biblical history. Now we confront the darkest chapter in David's life, one that haunted him for years. David's sin with Bathsheba stands as a stark reminder of human frailty and the consequences of yielding to temptation. While walking on the roof of his palace, David saw Bathsheba bathing and desired her. He sent for her, and they committed adultery. This act violated God's commandments and dishonored Bathsheba's marriage to Uriah, one of David's loyal soldiers. When Bathsheba became pregnant, David tried to cover up his sin by recalling Uriah from battle, hoping he would sleep with his wife and assume the child was his. But Uriah, faithful to his comrades, refused to enjoy marital comfort while his fellow soldiers were at war. Eventually, David planned his death by making Joab, the military leader, put him where he would be hit by the enemy's soldiers. Uriah died, and God was very angry with David because of this evil act. God sent the prophet Nathan to confront David, who then confessed his sin. Despite God's forgiveness, consequences followed. The child born to David and Bathsheba died, and David faced ongoing turmoil within his family. His eldest son Amnon raped his half-sister Tamar, who was a sister to Absalom. In revenge, Absalom had Amnon killed. In another twist of fate, Absalom rebelled against his father, leading to a civil war that sent David away from the throne. This eventually led to the death of Absalom. David's fall with Bathsheba reveals the depth of sin's impact and God's righteous judgment. It serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of moral compromise and the importance of repentance. Despite this dark moment, David's story also demonstrates God's mercy and the opportunity for redemption, reminding us of his grace even in our darkest hours. In the later years of King David's life, he ensured that Solomon, his son with Bathsheba, would succeed him as king. Solomon was not only David's choice, but also God's chosen vessel for a specific purpose. Early in his reign, Solomon had an encounter with God where he was allowed to ask for anything he desired. Solomon humbly requested wisdom to govern God's people wisely and discern between good and evil. This pleased God greatly, and he granted Solomon exceptional wisdom, as described in 1 Kings 3, 9-12. "Give your servant therefore an understanding mind to govern your people, that I may discern between good and evil. For who can govern this your great people?" It pleased the Lord that Solomon had asked this. And God said to him, "Because you have asked this, and have not asked for yourself long life or riches or the life of your enemies, but have asked for yourself understanding to discern what is right, behold, I now do according to your word. Behold, I give you a wise and discerning mind, so that none like you has been before you, and none like you shall arise after you." Solomon's wisdom and the privileges he enjoyed were directly tied to David's covenant with God. In 2 Samuel 7:12-16, God promised David, "When your days are fulfilled and you lie down with your fathers, I will raise your offspring after you, who shall come from your body, and I will establish his kingdom. He shall build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. I will be to him a father, and he shall be to me a son. And your house and your kingdom shall be made sure forever before me. Your throne shall be established forever." Solomon's reign fulfilled this promise as he foresaw the building of the magnificent temple in Jerusalem, symbolizing God's dwelling among his people. David's story is a powerful reminder of God's faithfulness and the importance of preparing the next generation. As we reflect on his last days, we see a man who, despite his flaws and failures, remained devoted to God and dedicated to the future of his people. David's legacy is not just one of a mighty king, but of a faithful servant who trusted in God's everlasting covenant.